Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing? A little louder. It's the middle of the day and there's no windows here. So I have the fabulous opportunity to talk about something, a value that's really near and dear to my heart, and it's transparency. And so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to speak a little bit about why transparency is important to investors, stakeholders, and the markets. Then I wanted to give you a couple of examples of how I have used and why I get so excited about transparency. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the CAQ and some of the projects that I've been involved in and used when we talk about transparency. But first, I want to be transparent. So I love transparency, but I took a look at who was going to be in the audience. And I said, oh my gosh. And I think Mary Shapiro said it very well once. It was like imposter syndrome. You were the folks that I learned from the very beginning. Peter Clapman, right over there, is in the audience. I was a young lawyer. Peter was at TIA-CREF. I went to talk to him, and I think, one, he thought I was very sincere, and two, he thought I was very naive. So he gave me some advice. And the advice was, know your shareholders, speak the truth, and be transparent. A couple of weeks after that, I went to a conference, and Nell Minow, I think you're also in the audience, right there. And Nell said the same thing, but she said it funnier, Peter. So, other folks in the audience, the organizations that I've worked with for many, many years, the NACD, Peter and Ken, helping me to have more transparent disclosure. The society, Ken, I don't know if you're in the audience when you were there, and Doug. The CII, I worked with the CII on transparent disclosure and what do investors really want and need. And I could go on and on. There's a number of other organizations. Ed Durkin, I don't know if you're in the audience, again, another investor, that we talked about clearer communication and transparency in what you say in your documents. So again, I feel very humbled to be around you because you're the ones that I think really have always been at the cutting edge and have taught me. So let's talk about why is transparency important. One of the things that I know why it's important, because if you know me, I like to save time. If I go into a room and I think someone is being transparent, I save so much more time trying to figure out what they're not trying to hide. I can do so much less research because I want to, it's not a, I gotcha. So, so to me, to really tell people what they need in a way that they can understand saves time. It makes you credible. It also makes you think, because if you're going to be transparent, transparency, I think, has at least two sisters. And that is relevancy and honesty or integrity, whichever way you want to put it. Because I can be transparent in 562 pages. I tell you everything. But I think you also have to be relevant. And I throw an engagement in that. So let me tell you how I've used transparency. Because I felt that disclosure and engaging with shareholders and really communicating was important, many years ago, I happened to be at a meeting with Chairman Levitt and Nancy Smith, and they were talking about plain English. And I said, wow, this really makes sense. Because I was at law firms, and then I was at corporations, and when I wrote memos to my board and to my senior executives, there was no way I was going to do 92 pages that no one could understand. I was in those boardrooms, and I heard those lawyer jokes from them. So I went out of my way to be transparent, to give them the information that they needed, to disclose it in a way that they got it on the first read and they knew what was important. So I had to think about, I had to prioritize, and I had to say it in a way that they got it. So plain English, I think, is one of the things that has helped disclosure. When I was at Prudential, what we decided to do is even go further because we did a lot of engagement with shareholders. And what I decided is, many years ago, when my children were little, one of my daughters asked me, "Mommy, what do you do for a living? I mean, what did you do today?" And I said, "I wrote documents that no one read unless we got sued." And she said, "Oh, that's so sad, Mommy." So that's when I decided maybe I can start writing documents that people might want to read, because if they do read, maybe I can engage with them. So I started doing executive summaries. I started doing not only executive summaries for the proxy statement and the CDNA, but also to do letters from the board, because they do represent shareholders, to say, you know, what were their priorities for the company. And then how about a letter from the lead director to talk about what is his or her role. And then I got wild and mad. You know, how about videos? You know, put videos of your lead director. And this year we'll also have a video of the chair of our governance committee talking about, among other things, how important diversity is. And this resonated because if any of you have 20-something children, you know they're not going to read a 120-page document. They might read summaries. They certainly are going to look at videos. And we also get a lot of communication from shareholders. And they'll say, how can I vote for someone if I don't know them? You know, by giving them an opportunity to come into the boardroom to really communicate with them. And lastly, I want to talk about some of the projects that I worked with for CAQ, which is the call to action, which I thought was wonderful, which is, again, it's an opportunity for companies to see what good disclosure looks like, what investors are looking for. And they had various models of what they considered good communication on the whole audit process and selecting outside auditors. And I think it got people really excited. It was like the first time I plain English the footnote for derivatives. It said it could never be done, but it could be. And the same thing by giving that type of disclosure, as well as the transparency barometer, you know, very important types of things to get us all excited. So I just want to end by thanking many of you in this audience, because you've been my inspiration to give people what they need and give it in a way that makes sense. And by giving boards this type of information, transparency, you'd be surprised, because they will read that, they will focus on that, they will understand it, and they possibly could change it. So with that, I want to introduce Jean. Jean is the next person to speak.